Matthew chapter 24. We'll begin in verse 42. While you're turning there, last week we talked about Jesus at the beginning of the Olivet Discourse there at the Mount of Olives, where he begins addressing his second coming there just before his crucifixion. And we talked about how the Jews have a pretty detailed idea about the coming kingdom, and they understand the coming of the Messiah will be previewed by a time of tribulation, those birth pains that we see prophesied about. They understand the Messiah will be the son of David. They understand there'll be a forerunner of the Messiah, somebody like Elijah. Then they believe the Messiah would come. The nations of the earth would come against him. The Messiah would then destroy them, purify Jerusalem. All the Jews that were dispersed would be gathered again to Jerusalem, and the area of Palestine would once again be the center of worship for the world as they come to the King to worship Jesus there, and then the Messiah would establish his eternal kingdom. But they didn't understand that Jesus was the Messiah. They didn't recognize him as that, didn't accept him as that. If the Jews had accepted Jesus as the Messiah when he came the first time, those events could have already been fulfilled. He could have set his kingdom up right after the resurrection there and established that. I was talking to a man today, and he said, I don't understand, because the prophecy of the 70 weeks of Daniel, right, we've only gone through 69 of those weeks. Those started when Artaxerxes said the Jews could go back and rebuild there. That was 483 years, right? 69 weeks of years up until Jesus. Right? The last week could have been fulfilled at that time. And that gentleman asked me, he said, why is there a gap between the 69th week of Daniel and the 70th week of Daniel? Because the Jews didn't accept him the first time he came, and so that delayed that. Same thing like when the Jews came out, the nation of Israel came out of Egypt. They could have went right straight to the promised land when God led them there and gone in. But instead, they didn't trust God, and so they had to wander around for 40 years, and the generation died. All the generations over 20 years died there, and then they got to go in. So that blessing was delayed. Well, I believe that's the same thing that happened with the millennial kingdom. It's just been delayed because God's people wouldn't accept that. But they will at the future time. But right after that, the disciples understood, I believe, from Ezekiel's prophecies that we talked about the glory of the Lord departing from the cherubims there over the Ark of the Covenant, which is inside the temple there. It departs, then it goes to the door, then it goes to the gate of the city, then it goes across the Kidron Valley to the Mount of Olives, and it's leaving Jerusalem and the Temple Mount there. And then the prophecy when he comes back at his second coming, it starts at the Mount of Olives, it comes back in through the eastern gate of Jerusalem into the temple, into the holy place there, and that's the return when he sets up the kingdom. And the disciples, that's what they're seeing in their mind. Jesus has left the temple. He's come out of the city. He's gone across the Kidron Valley to the Mount of Olives. He's given this discourse to them there, and they say, when's it going to happen? It can happen right now. We go from the Mount of Olives, we go right back into the city. Jesus cleans the place up, sets up his throne. But that's what the Olivet Discourse is about there in Matthew 24 and 25. Jesus is saying, no, it's not going to happen now. And because God's people have rejected him. And so the kingdom can't happen yet. And so he gives those signs and some things when it will be. As we move into this next question that Jesus asked here at the end of the chapter of Matthew 24, that we're going to see that Jesus has given those signs. We're not going to go over those. We've skipped over that portion because we talked about those in pretty good detail as we've studied through Revelation. And so we're not going to go over those again. But that's the details there in Matthew 24 before this. And so we're going to pick up at verse 42, read down through 51 this evening. He says, watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched, and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, and whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season. Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Verily I say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. But and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, My Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunken, the Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of, and shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Just to kind of put this in perspective, like I say, Jesus is talking about his second coming, being ready for that. We're looking for the rapture of the church. When you get right before the second coming, the people in the tribulation will be looking for his second coming. But there are three kinds of people in the world that have feelings about the second coming of Christ. Everybody has some kind of feelings about those events. One is some are excited about the second coming. They're looking forward for the kingdom to come. I hope that's us. I hope we're excited about Jesus coming, setting up his kingdom. That should be us as Christians. The other group, second group, they're afraid of the second coming, right? Because they know that they'll have to face the wrath of God at that point, because they aren't prepared to stand before God in judgment. They're not ready for his coming. And then the last group, the rest of the people that don't fit either of those, they're not excited or afraid because they've been deceived in some way. And so the first group are excited. Those are obviously Christians, right? An unsaved person wouldn't be excited about the coming of Christ. The second group, those who are afraid. Those are definitely unsaved. A Christian doesn't have any reason to be afraid of the coming of Christ. But the third group, those who don't really have either of those feelings, that can include both groups. That can include unsaved people and Christians. And that's pretty sad, because those people are basically so wrapped up in life that they don't care about what's coming in the future. They don't care about eternity. Everything's just about right now. Right? What can I get for me right now? What can I do for me right now? How is life going to be better to me right now? And they're not concerned about eternity there. And so, the sad thing is there are Christians that fit that description too. The unsaved, Satan has them in a good place there because they're focused on this life. They're not thinking about eternity, and time just slips right by. Next thing you know, they've gone into eternity and aren't ready for it. And that's where he wants them. But Christians that do that, they're not laying up treasure in heaven. Right? They're focusing their energy on this world instead of the next world. What can I do for God here that's going to benefit me in eternity? It's kind of like working your whole life and not making any plans for retirement. I talked to a young man today, 23 years old, and we were talking about, and somebody asked me there in front of him, he says, when are you going to retire? And I said, well, he was getting ready to retire in a month. I said, no, I'm not anywhere close to retire, and I've got 8 or 9 years left probably before I can retire. And so we were talking about it, and this young man chimed in, and he said, I'll probably just have to work the rest of my life. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, I don't know. He said, I'll just have to work till I die. I don't have any kind of retirement or anything. I said, start planning for retirement. You're 23 years old. Put 15% of your money in a good mutual fund. When you get to retirement age, you'll be fine. You'll be able to live. I said, don't wait until you're 50 or 55 and say, I better be putting something back, because you're going to be in a bad place. But that's kind of the idea. We don't want to wait until the end of our life when we've lost our health and lost the energy that we once had and say, I better do something for God now, so I'm going to have some rewards in eternity. No, that's not. And so, there are unsaved people who aren't thinking about accountability either. Like I said, they're just distracted about that. And, that's kind of like, you may have known people like that. I hope you're not one of these people, but some people they go crazy buying stuff on credit. I see this every year at Christmas time, where people just go out, they ain't got no money saved for it. They just go out and charge everything. And, and I've heard some of them say, wow, I really spent too much on Christmas this year and run up this big credit card bill. And I said, what are you going to do? And they said, I don't know. They've run up this big bill, and when the bill's going to come. They may get through Christmas, but come January, somewhere in that area, they're going to have to start paying that back at some point. And that's that's the idea. We're just going to do what we want now and worry about that later, right? Even though we haven't made any preparations for it, and that's not a way to live, especially unsaved person. To have this debt to your account, your sin debt, and have no way to pay it when you get to eternity. But in the first part of Matthew 24, Jesus answers the disciples' question from verse 3 about what will be the sign of the coming. And we get a bunch of those signs. Like I said, we've talked about those in Revelation. But as we move into this next part, the other part of that question there from verse 3 is, when shall these things be? And that's the point that Jesus is addressing here in these verses. Look at verse 42 again. He says, when is Christ coming back in his second coming? In verse 42 of Matthew 24, watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. We don't know what hour that will be. Verse 44 says very similar. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. It will be in an hour when people are not expecting it. Right? And then down in verse 50 again, he says, the Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for it, and in an hour that he is not aware of. And so we won't be looking for it. We won't be aware of it when it happens. We can know the signs of the time, but we can't know the exact day or the hour. Right? The time would be the age. Right? We know the age when Jesus is going to come back. The rapture of the church is going to happen in our age, the church age. That ends that and move into the tribulation. The second coming will be at the end of that, 7 years after that, even though we don't know the exact day of when that will be. It will be in that year, 7 years after the tribulation begins, is when Christ will come back. But it's a period of time. In Matthew 24, back up a few verses. I will read just a few verses from the part that we skipped over from last week. But in Matthew 24:36, but of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. It's only the will of the Father when that happens. Not even the Son. Jesus knows that time. Why not? That's intriguing to think about. Why does only the Father know? Why doesn't the Son know too? Well, it really isn't necessary. The Son is always going to submit to the will of the Father. Right? And so it really isn't necessary. I understand, at our house, Sheila is going to do laundry tomorrow. I'm certain of it. I really am. Do you know what time she's going to do laundry tomorrow? I don't know. I don't know what time she's going to do laundry tomorrow either, right? and the truth of it is, right, it doesn't really matter to me. I know it's going to get done. At what point of the day it happens, I don't care. I don't need to know that information. Right? All I need to know is when I get up tomorrow to put clean clothes on, she has done the laundry, and they're going to be there for me there. And I'm fully convinced that she has a plan for that. She has a plan to do the laundry. She knows when that will happen, but I don't need to know all of those details. When the disciples heard this from the previous verse, look at Matthew 24:34. Once again, we're talking about they're hopeful that the kingdom's coming. That's what they're hoping for. He says in verse 34, verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Now you understand what's going on in their hearts. They're thinking, okay, it's just like Ezekiel prophesied. It started from the Ark of the Covenant, went outside the temple, over to the Mount of Olives, and then when he comes back to set up the kingdom, it's Mount of Olives, through the eastern gate, back into the temple, and right there, and they say, oh, that's it. And now Jesus has said, this generation is not going to pass away. Right? Oh, it's going to happen in our lifetime. That's what they're thinking. That's the excitement. That's not what Jesus said there. That's not what he said. They believe they're living in that generation. They're the generation that's not going to pass away until the kingdom is set up. Jesus is not referring to them. He has just given them the signs that will happen in the tribulation period. Right? When he says this generation will not pass away, he's talking about the generation that witnessed the signs in the tribulation period. That generation is not going to pass away. Right? That's the generation. It's all going to come to a close. The rapture of the church will happen. The tribulation will begin. 7 years later, the kingdom will begin. The millennial kingdom and on into the eternal kingdom. And so, we don't see a generation change in 7 years. No 7-year-old child reproduces and starts another generation. No, there's just going to be that generation. The generation that's alive when it begins, those will be the ones that will be there at the end. And when the kingdom is ushered in, minus those who are killed during that time. But there in verse 37 of Matthew 24, he says, "But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." Now I want you to look back at the days of Noah, because this is good for us to say. We'll come back to Matthew in a minute. But look over in Genesis chapter 6 and verse 3. How much notice did Noah give the world about repenting before the flood? Anybody remember offhand? 120 years. 120 years. And you get that from Genesis 6 verse 3. Now, we don't know exactly how long it took Noah to build the ark. I'm guessing it's pretty close to that. Some say, well, he didn't necessarily start right there at the beginning when God gives him the message. I don't know. I tend to think he probably did. And when you're doing all these things, cutting all the trees down by hand, honing them all to fit, pitching everything on the inside and out, I'm thinking it's when he starts, he doesn't have sons. There's no grown sons to help, right? They come along in the middle of that, and so it's a daunting task, to say the least. So I don't know exactly when he starts building, but he does get 120 years. Notice, look here, Genesis 6:3, "And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years." And God says, okay, 120 years from now, mankind is going to be destroyed. That's the flood coming there. And Noah was telling multiple generations for that 120 years that it's coming. Right? Now, Noah doesn't know the day. He doesn't know the hour. All he knows is the year. 120 years from now, at some point during that year, it's coming. Now, look over in Genesis 7, verse 1. In Genesis 7:1, when the time is close, God gives Noah a little more details about that. In Genesis 7:1, he says, "And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation." And skip down to verse 4, and we'll see God give these details. In Genesis 7:4, "For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth." And so when it gets really close, God says, in 7 days, the world is going to flood. Right? Noah doesn't know, though, which day God is going to shut the door. Right? You remember, God shuts the door and seals him in. Right? Noah has no way of sealing the door himself. Right? God shuts it and seals it. And so he knows that the flood's coming in 7 days. He just doesn't know which day during that 7 God's going to shut the door. Right? And he knows the flood's going to start 7 days later, but he doesn't know how long he has to get in. Right? Look at verse 7, Genesis 7:7. God gives him the notice in a week. The floods are going to come. In verse 7 of Genesis 7, "And Noah went in, and his sons and his wife, and his son's wife with him into the ark because of the waters of the flood." When Noah gets the announcement, you got a week left, right? He goes in the ark. He goes right inside there. He doesn't try to soak up as much sunshine as he can on the outside. You remember there's only one window in the ark, and it's in the top. He doesn't say, well, we're going to be stuck in this thing. It's going to rain 40 days and 40 nights. I'm just going to stay out here for the whole week and soak up some sunshine. We're not going to have our feet on the earth for a long time. I'm going to stay. No, he doesn't do that at all. He said, God says it's going to happen in 7 days. I'm getting in now. And he gets inside. Noah if you read that account, look at Genesis 7:16. Noah's in the ark. Noah doesn't collect the animals. I know some teach that and shows them going out and collecting the animals and leading them in and all that. No, God leads the animals into the ark there when Noah and his family are already in it in Genesis 7:16. And they that went in male and female of all flesh as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. God directs the animals that are to be saved, 2 of each kind, 7 of the clean ones, and He guides them to that. So after the last creature that is going to be saved gets in the ark, then God shuts the door. Right? And so, if the people who are alive during the tribulation listen to those preachers at that time, the 144,000, the 2 witnesses, the people that are saved during that time, then they'll know they only have 7 years. Right? From the rapture of the church, they've only got 7 years. Right? But the problem of it is, what if God shuts their door before the 7 years is up? What if He cuts off their opportunity to get in before that? What if they die in those worldwide wars that are going to break out after the false peace sets in? What if they die in some of those natural disasters, the earthquakes, volcanoes, meteor showers? What if they die by the pestilences, those diseases that are going to affect the earth? What if they die before they get to the end of the 7 years? Right? And that's the warning there. Noah gave the people a huge sign by building the ark. We understand that was a huge sign. If you've ever been to the ark encounter there by Cincinnati, it's a pretty amazing thing. I've just seen pictures of it. It looks amazing from the pictures, but that's amazing. The rapture of the church, though, when all the Christians disappear at one time, that's going to be a huge sign there at the beginning of the tribulation period. The judgments that God begins unleashing on the world at that time, those will be a huge signs also. Right? So for most of the people on the earth, all of those details that we've been pouring over in the book of Revelation, they're going to be ignored by most of the world. Most of the world, they're going to see all these huge signs that God's giving all at one time, trying to urge people to get in. You've only got, the most time you could have is 7 years left. Get in. Be saved. Right? And so they're just going to ignore them. And when Jesus finally shows up, it's going to be a surprise to a lot of people. Right? Because they don't even think He's coming. They've ignored the signs. Look back Matthew 24:42. Matthew 24:42. He says, "Watch, therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come." That's why we're watching for Christ to come back. We don't know what's going to happen. Christians in this age are watching for the rapture. The Christians at the time of the tribulation will be watching for the second coming. But the word watch, therefore, is a present imperative, which means constantly watching. Right? If you remember when we talked about back in Ephesians 5, I'll just read it to you, but back in Ephesians 5, you see this text there, 15 and 16. "See then that ye walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil." Circumspectly means you're looking all around. You're paying attention to what's going on around you. You understand what's happening. I hope that we understand what's happening in our day and age today. How quickly we're moving toward the rapture of the church by the things that are happening in our world and the direction that things are going in. But, that idea from Ephesians 5 is you're constantly looking around, and then redeeming the time is seizing every opportunity, because we don't know when that's going to happen, but we need to be ready at any time, just like Satan's attacks that we're putting on the whole armor of God on Sunday evening. We don't know when Satan's going to attack, so we're going to be ready for that. Some of those pieces of armor we have with us. We have them on. We're prepared with that. The others we take with us. We have them close. So when we understand Satan's attacking us, we can put those on. We understand that process. Look at verse 43 of Matthew 24. "But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up." Now the watch that he's talking about there, the Romans had 4 watches of the night. The day's divided up in 12 hours. The night's divided up in 12 hours. So 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. is the day. 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. is the night. And so the 4 watches, you start at 6 p.m., they're 3 hours apiece. So 6 to 9 p.m. is the first watch, 9 to midnight is the second, midnight to 3 a.m., and then 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. Those are the 4 watches there. And so, he says, if you'd known which watch, which 3-hour period of time that the thief was going to come, you'd be ready and you'd keep him. They would break in. He was talking about there in that verses, the thief would come and his house be broken up because they would do things like dig through the walls, and a lot of the houses were that type of material they could dig through, or rip the roof off. Right, we see that in one of the miracles where the 4 friends let their lame friend down through the roof, and then they ripped the roof off. Pretty, it's not like ours. You come to break in your house or something, nobody comes up, crawls up on the roof and starts ripping off shingles and prying up plywood and going through that way. No, you break through a window or something like that. But that was the easiest place for them to get in. They could dig in, or they could go through the roof, break something that way. And so, but he says, if you knew the time. They didn't have to know the exact hour. If they just knew which watch it was going to be, since the night was 12 hours, so, if you say, well, it's going to be in the 3rd watch of the night, right? Well, you could stay up from midnight to 3 a.m. and catch the thief before he tore your house up, before he broke through and steal anything. And, the idea is 12 hours of the night there, even if you stayed up the whole 3 hours of the watch, you could still have 9 hours left to sleep, right? You could sleep 6 hours and watch that whole 3 hours in the middle and sleep another 3 hours, still be in good shape for the next morning, well rested. But if you had to stay up the whole 12 hours, right, well, you'd be a miserable person the next morning, wouldn't you? Yeah, I would. I wouldn't be worth a nickel if you had to stay up all night long and then go back to work the next day there. And so, but he's saying the idea is if you knew which watch it was going to be, if you had an idea how to narrow that period of time down, you'd be a fool not to stay up that watch and look for the thief, because it's coming. But Christ's coming is like a thief, which means it'll come suddenly. It'll be unexpected. And the thief, of course, takes what's treasured by the owners. No thief breaks into your house and says, oh, yesterday's garbage, I think I'll take that. They're really going to miss that. No, they take the things that are precious to you, that you treasure. Right? And so when Jesus comes back, he'll take the things that are treasured by us. If those are earthly things, well, what happens to them? They just go away. Right? They're wood, hay, stubble kind of things. They just go away. We lose them. Right? If the things that we treasure, though, are heavenly things, we get them. We get them in heaven. They're treasures laid up for us. Right? We just get rewards added to those things. And so that's the difference. Somebody that's not prepared, not been laying up treasures, they're going to lose a lot when Christ comes back. Somebody that has been laying up those things, doing things for God for eternity, we're just going to add to those things. And so it's a lot different perspective from somebody who's living faithfully and someone who's not. Look at Matthew 24:44. He says, therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. And that's the reason we're to be ready. There are some that will try to wait till the last possible moment to get in. Right? They will. They don't want to have to give up the pleasures of sin. And so they'll wait until the last possible minute, and then they'll try to just slip in under the wire. I'll go right to the end of my life, and I'll live however I want to. And when I see the end getting close, well, then I'll get saved, and I'll be good. Right? That's a scary place to be. It really is. It really is. And here's the reason. I understand there are people that get saved on their deathbed. The thief on the cross is one of them. He gets saved right there at the end of his life, and he's truly saved. We understand that. Jesus said, today you'll be with me in paradise. He was going to get to go to heaven. But if the attitude of a person is that they're just trying to wait as long as they can to get in, right? They don't really want to surrender their whole life to God, do they? No. They just want to avoid the punishment. Right? And that's not salvation. Salvation is you have a desire to repent, right? And you want to give your life to God. And in exchange, He's going to give us His righteousness. That's the transaction of salvation. Willing to give your life up and accept everything that Christ has given to us. And we see multiple examples of that. The pearl of great price, where the one finds it and he goes and sells all that he had and gives it. The one with the hidden treasure in the same chapter, that's in Matthew, but I can't remember the chapter right offhand. But same thing, goes and sells everything he has, and that's the idea, willing to give up everything. The rich young ruler, remember, he comes to Jesus and he wants eternal life. What lackest? What do I lack there? And he says, he wouldn't give up his wealth. It wasn't necessary for most people to give up their wealth, but that's his God. That's his idol. And he says, no, that can't come before God. He says, just go sell everything you have, come follow me, and you'll have treasures in heaven. He goes away sorrowing. Right? He won't give it up. He won't make the transaction. Right? He wants eternal life, but he doesn't want to surrender his life to God. That's not salvation. Matthew 16 and verse 24. Yeah, Matthew 16 and verse 24. Same kind of idea. Then said Jesus unto his disciples, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. If a person isn't willing to deny themselves, if they're not willing to give up that part, that old life, that old man, they can't follow Christ. They can't. And that the warning there in verse 25, that next verse, he says, for whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. And so a person who doesn't want to give up the old life, they're holding on as long as they possibly can. They can't have the new one yet. They can't have the eternal life if they don't want to give up the old one. And that they have to be willing to surrender all. And so, Christians who try to hold on to things of this life, we can't have the rewards. Sacrifice is how we get those rewards. We sacrifice something of ourselves, of our will, to do God's will, and then we get that reward in the next life. And the idea is from these verses, it doesn't matter when Christ comes back if we're ready. It doesn't matter when the kingdom is ushered in if we're ready. It doesn't matter when the flood comes in Noah's instance if we're ready. Right? It doesn't matter if sickness comes if we're ready. It doesn't matter what we have in this life. It doesn't matter what we've accumulated. Those things won't be hard to leave behind if we're ready to go. And so, those are just small details compared to eternity. But we don't want to wait till the last possible minute and try to serve God either and realize we're going to miss a lot of rewards when we get to the other side. Look back at Matthew 24:45. Matthew 24:45. He says, who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season. Now, faithfulness and wisdom are what God's looking for in us. We're stewards. That's the picture there. Ruler of a household was a steward who was given charge of that, and he would make sure the other servants were fed, and all those different tasks of the household were taken care of. And so he's given multiple responsibilities, not just one or two. Same thing for us as Christians. We have multiple responsibilities for God, not just one or two. My responsibility is not just stand up here and preach 3 times a week. I have multiple responsibilities. Same thing for you. It's not just to show up here and listen 3 times a week. You've got multiple responsibilities when you live here too. But a person who's made ruler over a household has those multiple responsibilities, and not just a couple things. There are lots of things there. Sheila handles the general affairs of our household. For example, I already talked about her doing the laundry. She's going to do the laundry. I can technically do the laundry. I did wash a couple loads of clothes a week or so ago while she was in Cincinnati with her sister. I thought that'd be really nice, and I'd give a couple loads of laundry and get that taken care of. She got home before I even got them folded or put away. They were all piled there on the bed for her when she came home. But I did get them washed and dried, so I did a little bit, but don't attaboy me too bad. But even though Sheila is going to be the one who primarily does the laundry, that doesn't mean that I don't participate. I still participate in that. I don't throw the dirty clothes on the floor.
He gets them dirty.
Yeah, that's my part. I dirty them. No, but even when I dirty them, I don't take them and throw them on the floor. We have a hamper for that right there by our bathroom, and I can throw them right in there and take care of that, right? You know, I could just throw them on the floor and I know, sure, she'll find them. Right? I'm sure she'd find them because she cleans the floors too. Right? But no, I can participate. I don't mix them with the clean ones either. Right? The dirty ones have a special place and the clean ones have a special place. I don't take the dirty ones off and say cram them in there with the clean ones and say, she'll figure it out. She'll sniff them or something and she can sort it out. She'll know which ones to do. No, you know, I don't expect her to clean them without detergent either. So I can contribute that way. I can, you know, help make sure we have detergent, even though she picks it up most of the time. But you know, I also don't expect her to go down to the sandy river and beat them on a rock either. Right? You know, I'm going to try to keep her in a washing machine. And sometimes, you know, those things break or something happens. You got to fix them or get them replaced or something. So, you know, we have a responsibility too, even though she's doing most of the work involved in that. You know, it's not like we can't contribute. You know, I have to do some things to make that happen. I have to use some kind of wisdom to try to make her job a little easier. You know, I wouldn't have been much help to Sheila last week if I hadn't sorted the laundry before I started washing it. If you've ever washed a really bright red sock or something like that with something white, you understand why that's a bad thing, right? Because you end up with some pink things, right, before it's over with. So that wouldn't have been much help if I'd have turned the white clothes pink by throwing something dark colored or bright something in with that. And so, you know, we understand that. But look at verse 46 there, Matthew 24:46. It says, "Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing." God should find us doing. Right? That's the idea. We're not just going to be ready because we're saved and ready for him to come back. He should come and find us doing something. I preached last Sunday morning about giving God praise. Right? Remember that sermon? About the 144,000, how they give God praise, and that's how we should do also. In order to give God praise, whose name has to come up? God's. And I talked about how I'm guilty of that. Because I'm awful bad to say things like I'm thankful for the weather and really enjoying this, and you know, and I've got the joy of the Lord in my heart, but sometimes His name don't come up, right? And so Monday morning, the first person I come to, guess what I said? God has sure blessed us with some wonderful weather today, hasn't He? Right? He has. Tuesday morning, first person I came to, guess what I said? Same thing. God has really blessed us with some beautiful weather today. Right? And Wednesday, guess what I did? No, I messed that one up. No, I messed that one up. Right? God blessed me Monday with a guy that I knew was a Christian. Right? So that one was easy. Right? The one Tuesday, I didn't know if he was saved or not. Right? So that one was okay too. The one that I saw today, I knew wasn't a Christian. He comes up to the truck and he starts using language that I'm not, you know, comfortable around, and then that. And guess what? I forgot. I forgot to praise God. I missed that. I was so concerned about getting away from this guy who was using this filthy language that I forgot I'm supposed to be witnessing to this guy. I could have been praising God just like I did the first 2 days, but I didn't. Right? And so, you know, that's the idea. I ain't just going to stand up in the pulpit and preach it to you all and say, go out there and do it. Right? It's my responsibility, the same thing, to follow those same instructions. And so, you know, we want to be better all the time. And I understand. I'm not good at that yet. So I'm going to keep practicing. I hope you're doing the same thing. Right? But that's what we want. We want to be doing. You know, if God comes back today or tomorrow, right, or the next day, what's He going to find us doing? Right? What's He going to find us doing? sometimes we're wasting the resources that God has given us. We're wasting the energy that God has given us. We're wasting the time. Sometimes even worse, we throw in some sin along with it too, right? That would be really embarrassing for a child of God to be right in the middle of a sin when the rapture happens and God catches us. You can imagine how humiliated and ashamed we'd be when that happens. We should be ready for that at any moment. Right? We should be. And so God should find us doing things that are pleasing to Him. Look at verse 47, Matthew 24. Verse 47, he says, "Verily I say unto you, that He shall make him ruler over all His goods." The obedient servant is made a ruler, right? Ruler over all His goods. The idea is we get to rule with Christ. We get to rule with Christ. What about the others? What about those who don't obey? What about those who don't surrender their life to Christ? What about those who don't follow Him? Look at the next two verses, 48 and 49. "But and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, My Lord delayeth his coming, and he shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunken." Some that claim to be Christians are going to waste their lives. They're going to waste their opportunities. They're going to waste the time, the energy, the things that they have. They're going to continue to sin and not be as holy as they should be. We understand that. Some are going to do that. Right? But, there are also people that are planning for more time. They're not really saved. They just expect they're going to get more time. They expect the Lord is going to delay His coming. And we talked about that last week, the delayed blessing of the kingdom. That's been delayed. It's been put off. We don't know how long that delay is going to be, but we know it has been, right? Because the Jews wouldn't believe. And so, he said during this process, he gives this example there of an evil servant, which means he's not a true servant of God. The evil servant there says, I've got plenty of time. The Lord of the house is not coming right away. It's been 2,000 years almost now, right? It's not going to happen right away. He delays that, and he begins to abuse those who are supposed to be on the same side. This is someone who's pretending to be a child of God. He starts mistreating those who really are, and then to make that even worse, he talks about eating and drinking with the drunken. He's a partier. Right? Not only is he a fake Christian, right, but he's involved in some pretty bad sins, I would call them, drunkenness and partying and doing those things with the ungodly there, But most people who are pretending to be saved, they're not going to go that far. They're not going to be drunks and out doing those kind of things. They're trying to hide it pretty well if they're pretending there. But you notice there skip down to verse 51. In verse 51, they don't have to be the worst kinds of hypocrites. Right? In verse 51 he says, "And shall cut him asunder and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites." Yeah, those who are pretending and they're abusive to God's own people, the true children of God, those who are involved in those open sins, right? Drunkenness and different things, they're going to get the same portion as those who have those really pretty clean lives, like the Pharisees and the scribes and those different ones. They're going to get the same portion in eternity for being those kind of hypocrites there. They can pretty up the outside, but if God hasn't changed their heart on the inside, they're going to end up in the same place, which is in hell. Look over in Luke chapter 12, verse 46. Luke 12, verse 46. Just so you understand exactly who the hypocrites are, because he just calls them evil servants here and hypocrites, but Luke gives a little clearer detail about that. Luke 12, verse 46. "The Lord of that servant will come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour when he is not aware, and will cut him in sunder, and will appoint him his portion with the unbelievers." Unbelievers, the sinners. Right? It's the portion with the unsaved. There in that verse there in 51, and Luke also says, "cut him asunder." The word is dichotomeo, which means to bisect, or to cut in two pieces. Right? Some of you deer hunt. Anybody deer hunt? I know Lori does. Right? Do you ever deer hunt, Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. When you kill a deer, right, and you hang it up, right, what do, Lori? You hunt still, don't you? Yeah. You split that thing, right?
Yeah,
You split that thing right down the middle and you open it right up, right? You separate the two halves, right? The guts fall out, the blood falls out, right? That's my dad used to put some kind of a bar or something in there and spread it out, and it was pretty gruesome for a kid to look at, but but I remember that, But you're basically cutting the thing in half, right? You're bisecting it. That's the same idea with the animal sacrifices like they did in the Old Testament, right? They cut them, let the blood drain out. They bisect them. That's this word here, cut asunder, right? And he describes the people are treated that way. Right? And the idea is not that they're gutted like a deer or, like that. The idea is it's like they're their own sacrifice. It's a picture of the animal sacrifices there. When the servant is cut asunder, they don't have a substitute for their payment for sin. They're their own sacrifice. And that's that picture. The animal sacrifices were the substitute until Jesus came. Right? They were the picture of his death, right? Where he shed his blood. He was an innocent lamb, and he provided that for us there. But these people don't have a sacrifice. That was only pointing up to the time when Jesus was killed and shed his blood, died, was resurrected. That became the fulfillment of that. Look at 1 Thessalonians 5. Finish up here. Those who are cut asunder there, a picture of them becoming their own sacrifice for sin. They're cast into hell. It says there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. In 1 Thessalonians 5, 2 through 4, it says, For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say, Peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief. We're not of the darkness if we're saved. This shouldn't be a surprise to us. Right? But even the unsaved, when you come, and we talked about this some, it's been several weeks back now from Revelation, but there are some people that are they're just, even amidst everything that's going on during the tribulation, they just seem optimistic all the time. It's kind of like, we've survived all of this so far. We'll just go ahead and keep doing what we're doing instead of surrendering to God. It's really an amazing optimism, but it's okay. We're going to be okay. We're going to make it somehow. We've done it this far. It's going to get better, right? That's kind of like saying I'm going to get better at cornhole without playing cornhole. That doesn't happen. That's like saying I'm going to get better at witnessing to people without witnessing to people. Or I'm going to get better at being faithful to church without being faithful to church. I'm going to get better at praising God on the mail route and using God's name. But that can't happen if I don't do it. If I don't practice it. And so that's the idea. We don't get better at anything for God that we're not doing. It just doesn't happen. You can't say, well, I'm going to trust God and expect the first time you go out and try something like that it's going to come out good or perfect. It's not. That's what Jesus sent his disciples out. You remember when he's still training them in the internship, and he doesn't send them out with money or extra clothes or anything like that. And he says, just go out and witness. Go out and share the gospel and that. He knows they're unprepared. They're supposed to be unprepared. He knows they're going to make mistakes. They were supposed to make mistakes. That's how you get better for God. Right? You realize, hey, I should have done this differently. Same thing, that's what happened to me today. Tomorrow when I go back out, I'll know. When somebody starts cussing or carrying on in front of me, I can't let that distract me from what I'm supposed to be doing, which is sharing God with them. Right? So I hope to do that better tomorrow than I did today. Right? And better next week too. But the idea of these people here, the fakes aren't faithful. The fakes aren't faithful. You see people that pretending to be Christians, they're not faithful to any of those things. They're not. They're just not. And so we don't have to be good at anything for God. As long as we're doing things for God, God's going to make us better at them. That's important. So, okay. Any questions? Comments?